Hello, this is David Bierman. I will be uh, having my fourth presentation on whistleblowing correctly. Did James Alderson act in accordance with the IMA's statement for ethical practicing professionals? Briefly, Mr. Alderson was a finance officer at a hospital. His career had slowly moved from his own public accounting firm, which had the hospital as a client, to becoming a finance officer when the hospital needed one. Everything was going fine until the top administrator for the hospital left, and the hospital decided to go with a management company instead, Quorum, to run the hospital. Quorum used an aggressive position when it came to billing the U.S. government, so it was able to earn higher revenues. So what was essentially the problem? The problem for Mr. Alderson was that the new company's administrator, Mr. Eder, asked for two different expense reports. One of them, again, had an aggressive billing to the U.S. government. And then there was a second one, a backup, in case the first one was denied. The first claim was denied by the U.S. government, so they could submit a more conservative one to get that approved. Now, the difference between the two expense reports had been, or it was put into a reserve account until the U.S. government paid the claim, the first one filed, and then that reserve amount was taken from the reserve and booked as revenue. What was Mr. Alderson's reaction to being told to keep two sets, or to having two sets of expense reports? He blatantly said that he had never prepared two tax returns for a client and he wasn't going to start preparing two sets of expense reports. At that point, Mr. Eder, the company's administrator, left the room, and Mr. Alderson asked some other colleagues if the practice seemed wrong, which they all agreed that it definitely did not seem correct to them. So what was the hospital's response? The hospital's response was on a trip, a management trip to Alaska. He was essentially fired. He was told he was going to be let go. Afterwards, Mr. Alderson filed a wrongful termination case and asked for copies of the two sets of reports, in addition to other things, trying to prove his claim, which he ultimately did not prove. So now, what would the IMA's SEPP suggest? The main thrust of what the IMA would suggest is to seek to resolve the issue. You wouldn't want to, conclude this is a wrong action, I'm quitting, period, I'm not going to do anything. You're going to try to resolve the issue to hopefully change the company's mind and put them on the right path. So how would you do this? Well, the IMA suggests several steps. First of all, you would go through the company's procedures. Do they have policies in place? Do they have a ethics hotline, ethics officer, anything like that? Next, you would go to a supervisor. If your supervisor is the one who is telling you to do the unethical acts, you would want to go to one higher up than him. You might also go to the company's audit committee if it's an accounting issue. They also suggest contacting the IMA's hotline for suggestions on other means to solve it, or to seek a counsel from an attorney, and at the very last, separate from the organization. Now, was this guidance followed? No, but it might not have been his fault. By blatantly saying he wasn't going to do this, he didn't leave the company any wiggle room. He should have probably asked for time to understand what was being asked, and then to gain some time, some support, talk to higher ups, go through some of the other procedures, but he was not allowed because he was terminated on the spot. Thank you, and I hope you enjoyed this presentation.